Hey, I'm PH, and welcome to another episode of Good Bible Knowledge with PhD. In this set of videos, I want to study the words and works of Jesus to give a clear understanding and a deeper appreciation of the love of God expressed through this most important figure in human history. And I hope these videos will help you in your own spiritual journey in Jesus. Let's get started. The early events of Jesus in the Gospels were recorded to establish Jesus' right to be recognized as the King, the Messiah from God. In his baptism, God publicly proclaimed Jesus as his Son, in whom he is well pleased. Following his baptism, God led Jesus into the desert to demonstrate Jesus' moral right as the King from God. Jesus was in the desert for 40 days, growing physically weak from hunger. And it was at this time that he confronted Satan, the enemy. Satan's strategy was threefold, with the opening statement, "If you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." This first temptation was an attempt by Satan to sway Jesus from perfect obedience to the will of God in order to satisfy his own personal needs and wants. Jesus responded by quoting Deuteronomy, "Man does not live on bread alone," which affirmed Jesus' commitment to obey God's will above independently satisfying his own personal desires. Satan then took Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem and said, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For it is written that he will command his angels concerning you, and he will rescue you, so that you will not even strike your foot against the stone." Satan's implication was that Jesus, as a son, had the right to put his Father to the test. And to leap from the temple would not only test God's promise of protection, it would also prematurely present Jesus as the Messiah in a most spectacular fashion, both of which were not in obedience to God's will. Christ responded by quoting Deuteronomy 6:16, "Do not test the Lord your God." In this, Jesus showed absolute confidence in God and remained in perfect obedience to his will. In the third and final temptation, Satan took Jesus to a very high mountain where he showed him a vision of all the kingdoms of the world and said, "All this I will give to you if you bow down and worship me." Satan in some respects could lay claim to many worldly political kingdoms in that they were captive to the curse of sin. And Satan was suggesting that he could provide a way for Jesus to become king without going to the cross, if he would simply abandon God's will and worship Satan. Christ affirmed his unwavering commitment to God's will, even in the face of extreme suffering, by quoting Deuteronomy 6:13, "Fear the Lord your God and serve him only." At this, the devil left him. Having resisted all three of Satan's temptations, Jesus demonstrated his moral perfection and his unswerving obedience to God, affirming his identity as the Messiah, the King from God. This confrontation between Satan and Jesus in the wilderness illustrates the nature and reality of spiritual warfare. The Bible makes it clear that Satan is the great adversary of God, whose twisted agenda is to tempt God's beloved to abandon God's ways and act independently from his good will. Jesus, our great high priest, presents an example of one who was tempted in every way just as we are, and yet did not sin. In this account, Jesus was not simply an example to follow, rather it is also an illustration of what Jesus would do on the cross for all of mankind. 1 Corinthians 15 refers to Jesus as the second Adam. In Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, Satan tempted the first Adam to disobey the commands of God and eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. By yielding to Satan's temptation, the first Adam tragically brought the curse of sin and death upon the entirety of humanity. Here we see that Jesus, the second Adam, was also tempted by Satan, and his obedience to God defeated Satan and the curse of sin, and made the gift of eternal life available to everyone who would believe. Thanks for listening to another episode of Good Bible Knowledge. We'll see you next time.